Hey guys, Demetrius here, joined again by Mr. Jesse Engel. How's it going, Jesse?
It's going pretty good.
Well, thanks for coming back. Excited to have you. I'm excited to dig in today. We got some stuff I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. So very good. But in the meantime, what's new? You told me you have not been playing a ton of pool. Life been running you over a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, but I still find time for a few racks here and there. But it's hard to dedicate multiple hours a day to play. So,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Well, we'll remedy that here in just a little bit.
all
I've
right.
got a pool table. I know how to get there. I have directions to a pool table, as it turns out. So okay, well, let's see. What do we have today? So first of all, thanks for the positive feedback on the last episode I did with Jesse about entitlement and bad days. And I had a funny incident that happened with a student not long ago that I thought was really interesting that tied into that. So I wanted to run it by you. I was working with a student, and to be fair, we'd been doing a 3 day boot camp. Yeah, for people that are listening, come to my 3 day boot camp and train pool. You can get more info at mnpoolbootcamp.com. MN for Minnesota, mnpoolbootcamp.com. I do these 3 day training sessions that are pretty cool, and more information is available. But anyway, so she comes over and we were training. So it was day three. And so on day three, people are worn out mentally, they're worn out physically, they're working on different things. They can be overthinking stuff at times. It's real fatiguing, at times. Um, that's why I don't call it MN Pool Spa, right? It's a
Hmm.
boot camp. Anyway, but at one point I had her doing this run out where the very first shot in the run out was a stop shot in the side pocket with ball in hand.
Okay.
And it was the first ball of this marked run that we had. And she missed this ball eight, nine, 10 times in a row, Jesse.
Okay.
And she wasn't the type of player that was she. There's players that, like, if you took a break beginner, maybe they miss ball in hand. It's just hard to make a stop shot. Like, she was not at the point where you'd think that she would miss a straight in ball in hand 9 times in a row. I'm not exaggerating. Like, it might. I wasn't counting, but it might have been in the double digits. It was definitely all of 8 or 9 misses in a row. And so what was happening? She was tight and hitting hard, and putting the cue ball was spinning and going to the side, and it was just like this total regression from anything that we'd seen over 3 days. And I was just, I'm curious. I get curious, not furious. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So then I told her, I said, say, you know, we kind of need to make this ball. Like I think that maybe we're just not giving this shot its due respect. Like, you're just kind of in your mind, you're like, well, you shoot this in and stop, and then you're thinking about the next ball and you're worried about where you're going to go. But I'm like, this ball is obviously, it's giving you some feedback that you're not really putting in enough on this first shot. So, like, why don't we kind of come back to the present and just take a look at what's going on and see if we can't remedy this and give it a little bit more respect. And she got down and missed it 3 or 4 more times. And I mean, this is a shot that it's you would not think that you could miss it this many times. It just didn't look possible. And so for people that think that, like, the game is not a mental game, it's like, well, boy, how is this possible? I mean, this is not a physical thing at this point. This is just not possible to happen if it's not some type of mental block. And so in the moment, I had this idea, and I walked over and I grabbed one of my pocket tighteners. And my pocket tighteners, you plug them into the pocket and they shrink the opening to where there really isn't an easy shot. Even with ball in hand, shooting a ball on the side, you have to aim carefully. Otherwise, it just won't go in. And you have to strike it really well to put the ball in. And I went in and put the pocket tightener in. And I said, well, that's going to make the opening much smaller. That's going to make the shot a lot tougher. Go ahead. And then she got down and hit no spin, perfect stop shot, and split the wicket on that side pocket. Now, with ball in hand, it wasn't that hard of a shot. That's not what I'm saying. But all of a sudden, I just so why do you think that would happen? That when I would put the pocket tightener in, she would suddenly split the wicket.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, there could have been some sort of mental block there that, for whatever reason, when you put it in or put in the pocket tightener, it just sort of forced her to obviously focus a little bit differently. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have the answer to that one, but that would be my best guess. Is that probably just took it too lightly, or maybe the more times that it was happening, maybe that kind of like, sort of took away her confidence in a sense, maybe made it a little bit embarrassing, and then, if that makes sense, it's sort of like
Yeah,
there's
that
a
negative.
snowball effect, and
Yeah,
all of a
you get
sudden,
that negative going off
yeah,
the rails, like nightmare. This is a nightmare. Yeah, I think all of that. And so when we were talking about bad days in our last episode, um, it made me just realize that, you talked about entitlement, and of course we both are firmly in agreement with that. And yeah, I think that it's really easy to where the shoulds get us, where it's like, well, I should be able to make this. I shouldn't be missing this. This shouldn't be so hard. And that when you have the idea that I'm the kind of player where this ball should just go in for me and it shouldn't be fighting back like this, and I don't understand why it's not just going in like it's supposed to. That's a very entitled attitude.
yeah,
And even though I told her it's not just going to go in, and you're not giving this enough respect. Even though I told her that, it's like, well, she was still stuck on it. And then all of a sudden, by putting the pocket tightener in, it changed that, because all of a sudden, instead of thinking this ball should go in, she started thinking, boy, I was struggling before. Now the opening is really, really small. I don't know if I can make this. I don't know if I can make this go in. And all of a sudden, the expectations that she had about whether or not this ball was going to go in, she let go of all of her expectations. And it was like, well, I don't know if I can do this or not. I guess I'm going to have to try really, really hard and give it a chance and see. And it turns out that that surrendering and saying, I don't really know if I can make this, I'm going to have to give my all and then we'll see, is much, much more effective mindset than saying, this will go in. It's automatically going to go in. A player like, this should be no problem. I don't even have to give my best, and it should just go in for me. Like, it's just a totally different mindset. And so it was very funny because I had her shoot just one ball in with that pocket tightener. And then I took the pocket tightener and told her to shoot it again. And all of a sudden she started made it every time, never missed it again. And so to me, uh, I thought that it was just, and I have these moments all the time. I dozens and dozens or hundreds on hundreds. I don't know. I mean, this is just the kind of funny thing was when I'm training with people and I'm in the moment, I see their mindsets. And then what's cool about that is then we can kind of get into talking about why, so they can learn these things, because part of learning mental game and learning to compete is when you find yourself slipping out of the right mindset, you have to understand the symptoms of where you're at mentally and what's going on. And a lot of the game, a lot of times if people are doing that, they're going to be checking their stroke and checking are they getting down right, which maybe, but to me, a lot of it is just that outlook. And anyway, I thought that was an interesting story based on our last talk. What do you think?
yeah, it is, and it kind of just made me think about something on the spot here, which is I feel like something that's maybe not discussed as much as it should be is that like everybody has a mindset when they're playing pool. They have like this like natural thing that happens, their thought process when they're practicing, and of course everybody's trying to do their best. They're trying to pocket balls, they're trying to run the racks, and then when they go to like receive some sort of instruction, they're not really even sure, like they've never been trained on how to receive instruction mentally. So then now like they go into each shot and naturally they just think a certain way. And then now when they go to shoot these shots, now you're telling them how they're supposed to be thinking, and what the reason is why they're even doing this. And their mind's not really ready for that. In my, I don't know exactly how that works, but that's just something I was thinking about on the spot here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is I think about the inner game of tennis. They talk about one of the interesting stories was this when Tim Galloway was talking about how he learned the foxtrot, which is a really rudimentary dance, and he learned it when he was at junior high school or something. And he said that the way that he was being taught was kind of like the way you'd program a computer. It was like verbal, line by line instruction. Do this, step forward, turn left, count, 3 steps this way, da 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 da. And he said that it was so ineffective because it took him like an hour a day in gym class for like a month before he could do that dance without counting out loud in his head, or counting in his head rather. And he said it was just the most miserable, grindy way to learn ever. Whereas when you watch a couple teenagers go to a party and they learn like 2 or 3 complicated dances that are far more complicated than the foxtrot, and they do it in like 5 or 10 minutes, because what they do is they watch the other person and then they get up and then they try to do that dance themselves, and then the other person says, oh no, more like this, and then they make like they just kind of emphasize 1 or 2 movements a little different, and then the guy feels it a little bit, and within like a minute he's doing that more complicated dance as opposed to 20 hours. And so Tim Galloway was talking about the peril of verbal instruction. He also told a story which was really interesting. So for anybody that hasn't read The Inner Game of Tennis, highly, highly recommend it. He told another story that's a real brief one where he had a brand new tennis student, never received any instruction, didn't know how to hold a racket hardly, and he said, "I'm going to try something new. I'm going to try to minimize the role of verbal instruction. So instead of telling you what to do, I'm just going to hit 10 forehands, and then I want you to see what happens." And so he gets up and he hits 10 forehands, and he hands his student the tennis racket. And he says, "Don't say anything, just hit the racket." And the guy says, "Well, I noticed that the first thing you did was move your feet." And Tim, the instructor, was like, "Okay, just whatever, just go ahead and hit the ball." And apparently the guy tosses the ball up in the air, comes through with a beautiful swing, good timing, meets that racket head, that rolled the perfect way, hits a great forehand. He did almost everything right on his first try. The only thing he didn't do was move his feet. The one thing that he verbally pointed out was the one thing he failed to do. And Tim was blown away with this revelation. And he realized that as an instructor, verbal instruction is really dangerous because the part of our brain that's like thinking and giving orders is not the part of our brain that performs. And he gets, this is why his discovery of the two parts of us, the thinker and the doer, and all this relationship between the two, it's a very interesting book. But so for sure, what you're saying about like, when a student is in the mindset of giving themselves verbal instruction, it's not necessarily the most effective way to learn, and it's not always the most effective way to, it's certainly not the most effective way to perform. And so one of the reasons why I really like these boot camps where I'm working side by side with people is that I, if I'm working through a YouTube video or if I'm working through a Zoom call, I just feel like I'm somewhat limited to words. Whereas when I'm side by side with somebody, there's a lot of things I can do to use visuals and build in feelings and lead people down paths in different ways that are actually help people develop new feels and understandings without having to be like, for example, one thing I hate doing is like, no offense to people that might do this, but like anybody that has like any instructor that has like a 20 prong like pre-shot routine that's some 20-point checklist of things you're supposed to do on every shot, I'm like, it's just, that's not the road I like to go. I'm you gotta, it's this weird balance where you have to have those things sometimes, but you gotta build in a feel for them. And I'm sorry, I know I'm going for a while, but like as a great example of this, I tell, this is the kind of the example, is if somebody went to a pool hall and they pulled their pool cue out of their case, they screwed it together, they set up a shot, and they wanted to shoot a draw shot. Would they have to tell themselves to chalk their cue, or would they just need chalk on the cue? It's like, well, I don't think anybody really thinks I need to remember to chalk my cue before I try this shot. Like nobody really thinks that anymore. But you just know you just feel the need to do it. And I try to build certain things to where we just feel the need to do the right things without having to be telling ourselves to do them. Well, does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Perfect
Is
sense.
that kind of what you were saying with like instruction or
A little bit, yeah. I just, yeah, it's hard to, like you said, it is hard to perform while you're mentally trying to think through the steps of what you're supposed to be doing, you know. So, I mean, it's hard for me to remember a time with pool necessarily because I've always, I don't know, maybe that has happened in my pool, but now it's like if you and I talk about a certain shot, like it just kind of clicks and makes sense before we even get down to shoot the shot because we've already built up a skill set, I guess. But if we were, if I didn't know how to, let's say, draw the cue ball 3 or 4 feet, and then you were sitting there trying to explain, like, no, 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 here's what you're doing. Like, we need to go a little bit slower with your backswing, and then make sure that you follow through, this 8 inches instead of this little pokey, faster 4 inches that you're doing, whatever it is, right? I would be trying to think that through while I'm doing my warm up strokes, and it would be very difficult for me to actually execute because, that's just not how the brain works. So,
yeah, it's a tricky thing because there is a role to where a cognitive understood. The funny part about pool is that it's not a game that's all cognitive like chess, and it's not a game that's all performance and just it's not such a real time. It's not like tennis or something where you're just very quick, and there's a lot of nuance and strategy in pool where you have to think a lot, but then you have to be able to perform as well, and it's a tricky balance between the two, especially because you have time between shots to think. And so and so it's a funny thing. So there is a role for words and there is a role for cognition, but a lot of times that role, it's you have to sometimes use words to communicate concepts and ideas that people aren't just going to be able to develop a feel for where the tangent line goes, or how high low is going to change the cue ball's path off the tangent line. Like, they're not going to develop a feel for that. You're not going to teach that idea to somebody and without using some words. But the purpose of those words is to help them build a model to where you quickly want to leave those words behind and develop a feel and an understanding that's not so heavy with your, you don't have to think so hard. So it's almost like the purpose of the words is to communicate the minimal necessary number of ideas you need so that people can start building the understandings and feels and pattern recognition and yeah, connection with the game that they need so that they can leave those words behind. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Cool. All right. Well, then, thank you. So then I have a question for you because I've been curious about this. I actually surprised I haven't brought it up sooner. I got sick at the Derby Classic and the Derby City, and I was thinking about this because I think I ended up having to forfeit out of the 9 ball because I wasn't feeling well, and apparently almost 20 players got sick and had to forfeit out, which means that something was going on. Something was going around because that's a large number of forfeits. So my question is, like, when you're not feeling well, there's what are the like do you when do you forfeit out and when do you power through? Um, do you owe it, like, at some point, there's this part of us that's like a warrior fights through. If I'm not dead, I'm playing. But then at what point do you have an ethical responsibility to not show up at a match with a runny nose, sneezing and coughing and spreading that stuff around? Like, would you ever forfeit a match because you feel like it's not right to risk contaminating a room full of 400 people? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, interesting. I haven't really taken much time to think that part through as far as like the ethical responsibility, think about others, but I don't know. It really depends. It's like, would you, do you not go out and go get groceries or do whatever your day to day stuff is just because you have a little bit of a stuffy nose? Like, probably not. But I think there is a certain point. I mean, if you know that you're pretty seriously sick and very contagious at that point, it's probably not wise to be, partaking in a pool tournament, which is not really a necessity. So I don't know though. I don't know where I would draw the line. I'd have to think that one through a little bit more. Um, if you're asking for like personal times that maybe I've considered forfeiting or have forfeited, I could run you through a few of those if you wanted.
Yeah, give me an example of one where you pushed on and one where you didn't.
Yeah. So, well, the one that jumps to me right now that I can think of that I didn't push on was it was actually probably 2 to 3 years ago now. I think it was closer to three, but I went over to Wisconsin. It was actually during the time of COVID, is what it was. And I was not feeling the greatest kind of on Friday, I would say. And I was going to go over there and play a couple
Oh, I
guys.
remember this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't feel the greatest, but I'd already kind of made the commitment to go there. And, it was like a 4.5 hour drive or something. So I ended up rolling in on that Friday, probably at like whatever. And then I was supposed to be playing at like 7. And like I said, I didn't feel great, but I didn't feel terrible either. So I was like, well, whatever. I'll try to push through. And I tried, and that was a very, very, very bad performance. I think that was like the last time I can remember where I missed that many balls. But just to give a like in a race of 25, I think I missed like 7 10 balls that were like relatively
Oh,
routine. I mean, it was so bad that
oh
like the
yeah.
balls were blurry and like I was struggling to like just even stay. You can feel that I could feel that I just couldn't stay still.
That's where I got a Derby this year. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, well, it is what it is. Like I'm kind of out of shape playing pool in a sense. Like I don't do it all the time, so I'll just kind of lick my wounds. It is what it is. And then I was gonna be coming back to play the next day, and that was against that Jeremy Fed. I mean, Jeremy Fedkner. So I can't remember what time we were supposed to meet up, but we did meet up at like this is probably like noon or 1 p.m. to play some sets on the bar table. And I remember like I was not feeling good at this point. I didn't sleep all the night before, but again, we had already kind of committed to play. So we started playing, and I think he was either had won the first set or he was getting close. Like he was like 70 or 80% of the way there, and he had missed a ball, and he left me. The cue ball was probably like 5 or 6 inches off the rail. It was just a relatively routine shot that was a little off angle, but the object ball was probably 4 feet away or something. And I got down on the ball a couple times, and I just couldn't quite see it. Like it didn't feel right. And eventually I was like, well, I have to shoot, like so I kind of like tried to steady myself one more time, take a deep breath when I got down. And I mean, I might have missed the ball by an entire diamond. And I just was like, at that point I knew I was like, there's just really no point for me to carry on. So and the only reason why I was even fighting to try to, sneak through those sets is because it's like at the end of the day, there is money on the line. So you want to try to win and you're there. But I just called it at that point. I was like, hey, so I remember I paid him off like that set plus part of another one or something, and I was like, I just made the call personally. It just wasn't worth it for me at that point. Like I wasn't gonna try to save face or anything. I just didn't feel good, and then I remember I went back to the hotel room from there, and I think I slept like 12 or 13 hours straight through, and that was that. I woke up kind of like in a pool of sweat. I just didn't feel good,
Oh,
so it was one of those times. But and I'm so that was kind of a long story, but I mean I'm pretty sure that was like closely related to something COVID related. I'm not exactly sure, but it just wasn't good. The times that I've like pushed through, like yeah, I've felt stuffed up before where I kind of was like maybe losing my voice a bit, not really able to, you know, just not really able to breathe the best, and I've pushed through, and I feel like that was easier when I was younger, when it meant more to me. But nowadays, my will to carry on and fight, it's just there's really not much to gain from doing that, So I mean, I don't know. I think unless I'm like in a deep run in like a big tournament that means something to me, I just don't think I'm going to do it. It's just not worth me carrying on. I'd just rather skip it and come back when I'm healthy. So I don't know if that answers your
yeah,
question, but
yeah.
that's where
I
I'm at.
I think as I've been listening, as I've been thinking, like there is no clear line. I think that there's a couple things to be aware of. And so the first, I mean, there's like different levels, right? There's I feel fine, everything's great. And then there's levels of sickness where you're like, it's not even a choice. Like I'm just not able to get out of bed without being so woozy that like making it across the room to put on my shoes would like be exhausting because I feel so terrible. And you know, I think that I think that for me, like if I just a touch off, like if my voice is a little scratchy or I've got a mild background headache or a little bit of a runny nose or a little stuffy, like you're saying, and just if I don't feel like great, but I just feel like a touch off, yeah, I'm probably just gonna wash my hands a lot, and just try to keep calm and play through. But once I start feeling like I know, like if I have to ask myself, like, am I actually sick or not? Like I'll push on. But like once I know that for me, it's like, yeah, I know I'm sick. Like I for sure like this is not normal. Like I'm I'm sweating or I'm chilly or I'm really tired or I'm woozy and I'm like coughing and sneezing and stuff like that. Then at that point, I'm like, I could force myself to play, but A, I'm not going to play well. B, it's going to be miserable. And C, I feel like I'm not doing the world any favors right now. So I guess I kind of feel like if I would call in an office job, I would probably also call in at the pool tournament. And that's where I got at Derby. And so it's like I think that the reason I share this is because there's a lot of people that might have this one-dimensional approach, which is a competitor fights through. And it's like as a competitor, yes, you want to fight through, but that's not the only thing that's there's a time and place. There's a time and place, and it would be really tough. Where it gets really tough is people that do when like Tyler Steyer just had to forfeit out of the world championship, I think, because he was not feeling well and he had to go to the hospital. It was more than just a cold, by the
Oh, I
way.
didn't hear about
Yeah, I
that.
hope he's doing okay. But anyway, like I mean, if you're Fedor Gorst and you're coming to the finals of world championship, it would be hard to want to forfeit if you're sneezing or something. Like I think at that point, like I might have to make an exception and say like this is so important. And I understand that for players that have thousands and thousands of dollars at travel and time, it's really hard to forfeit out of a match. But if you're like, I think part of it is how sick you are, and part of it is how serious the situation is. And to your point, we're not in the finals of the world championship. So even when I'm at Derby, or even if you're in some tournament with if it's not like a once in a lifetime opportunity, it's probably not worth getting hundreds of people sick and killing yourself. So anyway,
Yeah,
just
I agree with
just
that.
some food for thought. I was just kind of curious. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, now let's feel better. Enough thinking about that. So let's okay. So let's. I want to talk about this. This was on my mind. It's been on my mind forever. I didn't even realize it was on my mind because I didn't understand it. And for me, trying to get my head around stuff. The reason I like pool is that pool is a very small, contained environment with four rails, a clear objective, pocket the 9 ball, pocket the 8 ball after whatever. Very clear rules, very clear objectives, very contained universe. And within that universe, I can make sense of it. Once you leave that pool table and you start dealing with like social constructs and how society views things, and once you go from like the objective rules of a game to the subjective world of society, it gets a little murky for me and it's hard for me to understand sometimes. And there's something that's been on my mind, and we've talked about it a little bit, but I want to dig into it a little bit more, which is pool still is pool a meritocracy where the most competent players are the winners, or is pool not a meritocracy where there are subjective measures based on aesthetics and based on other, popularity and image management that that are now integrated in the contest? So people might be listening and say, well, of course, pool's a skill game. And so let me try to warm up the conversation by just kind of laying out a couple outlooks and see what you think. So like when I was a kid, I thought pool is just a skill game. Um, the better player wins, or whoever plays better, whoever gets the job done wins. So one of the reasons I loved pool is that I personally struggle, and I don't really like the subjective social games. Like if pool, for example, was a contest of two players play for an hour, and then there's a panel of judges that watch how they play, and those judges declare a winner based on how somebody looked at the table and how much swagger they had walking around the table and how confident they looked when they fired balls in and how snazzy they dressed or what kind of beard the person kept and how trimmed their beard was. Like if the judge based on appearance, based on style, based on attitude, based on all these other things, if they voted on that and said no, we're going to give the match to so and so because they just had a lot of we really liked the way they performed. Like that would be, I wouldn't like that. I'm like, well, I'm not here to play all these other contests of social games. I'm here to put balls in the hole. And one of the reasons I've always loved pool is because I don't do particularly well. I don't really enjoy those games, and so I'm able to just put balls in the hole. And if I put balls in the hole, I win. And if I fail to, then I lose. And I feel like it's really, really fair, and it's a real meritocracy, and it's real objective, and I like that. But I feel like some of that's changed because, boy, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time setting the table. Why? Why? What do you? I'm going to pause. Do you understand where I'm coming through with why I like the objective meritocracy of pool?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is obviously an area where you and I have similar experience in it, just at slightly different time frames. So buckle up, trauma dump incoming. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, so I feel like I'm gonna have a relatively biased view on this. I'm gonna, whatever direction we take this topic, like I'll try to be as level headed and kind of fair as possible. But of course, I'm gonna be very biased because I've spent, well over a decade building up what I view as a very superior skill set to the majority of the field. And now there's no place for somebody that has a like our skill set left where we can still enjoy the things that we enjoyed coming up and building that skill set in a competitive environment while also still getting what we would at least view as a reasonable output from that. And that doesn't, to set that clear, like that doesn't mean that we deserve or we're entitled to like a certain level of monetary return for that, but it's more so just as the idea that like we've put in all this time, we have a skill set, and we're just we don't get like really anything from it in that competitive environment. And the only way that we can experience the things that we enjoy, I mean, I think we've touched on this in other topics, but or other conversations, but we just like our we have to input so much more at this point just to even be able to play, which is
So I want to I
anyways.
want to reassure people this is not. People might think that what we're talking about are handicap tournaments or Fargo cap tournaments, which plays a subset role of the conversation. But it's not going to be a discussion about our handicaps necessary or good or bad for the game. That's not where we're going with this. But I think it might help to understand a couple things. Uh, I think that what I would say is that at first glance, pool is a meritocracy. It's a very objective game. You win, you lose based on putting balls in the hole. That's it. What more could be said? And I don't know that that's quite the case because where it gets is, and the reason I'm sharing this is because pain and frustration in large part comes from not knowing the rules of the game you're playing. And so I don't mind, like, if you were going to play an 8 ball match and you went to some weird bar that had their own set of rules where you had to kick out to the kitchen and they didn't have, they had weird rules about what you could do as an accommodation. Like, you wouldn't care what rules they played. I mean, you might have a preference, but you just want to know what the rules are. And I think that the rules to the game have changed over the last 10, 15 years. Not the physical game, but with some of the social games and some of the weird things that have changed. And it's caused me some frustration because I wasn't in sync with what the rules were. And I think a lot of people listening to this are going to understand where I'm going with this. And it might help our listeners if they have a better understanding of. Some people might have some nagging, discomfort with what they've seen. So here are, in terms of how the game has changed, it helps to understand, to know the rules of the game. What are we playing for? And so you could say, well, so what's the purpose of playing a competitive pool match? What are the outputs that people are competing for? List them off. What are some of the things people compete for?
Yeah, they're looking for, I mean, titles, which and then there's like the social. I mean, there's a slight social aspect to it of validation. Obviously, some money in return, and yeah, I would say those are the main three, to be honest.
Yeah. So you said money, social validation, and the other one was
Like a
titles.
Yeah, the title, which is basically just feeling good about like yourself. Like
Okay, that's what I would say. So just to be clear, so you're playing for money, you're playing for an internal sense of accomplishment and personal satisfaction of setting a meeting and developing yourself and hitting goals. So there's an internal reward, as well as that's the as well as you could say the internal reward of experiencing the zone or experiencing. So there's some internal rewards, and then there's the external. So I guess now that I'm sorry, I'm going to start this over. There's internal rewards and external rewards. The internal rewards are experiencing dead stroke and the satisfaction of accomplishing certain goals. The external rewards are money and social validation. And if you had to draw a pie chart and say how much of these things matter, I would guess that it differs depending on different players. A lot of players, are really satisfied with, dead stroke and their own personal achievement. I would say money is the smallest slice of the pie because for most of us, winnings at pool is less than 1% of their annual budget. A lot of people spend more money on equipment and tournaments and hotel and travel than they win. I just don't think money is really a factor that people think it is. I think people think that it's about money because they don't really understand why they're playing and what's driving people. I think that there's internal rewards and then the external rewards of social validation, I think are very, very high. And that I think for a healthy, mature, balanced person, I think it should be like mostly internal rewards with just a little touch of external. But I think in the world we live in, that a lot of people have a lot of the motivation behind what they're competing for are the social rewards. And one thing I'll mention on this is I'm reading my kids How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it was very interesting because in chapter 3, I believe, he talks about how people, once they have their physical needs met, food, shelter, whatever, people desire importance. People have a desire for importance to where he was talking about how criminals, when they get arrested, they're going to prison for years. The first thing they do is they get a copy of the newspaper where their crime was written up so they can look at the paper and look at it and be like, that was me. People desire significance and importance to the point where they will go to prison for it. And a lot of stuff that you would think is, well, they were doing that to steal the TV or something. It's like a lot of it is because they want to be something. And so people desire being something. And so I think that in short, there's internal rewards and external rewards. I think a big part of the external rewards are a feeling of significance and a feeling of social validation. And I think that that's a big driver for a lot of people, and that people that's a huge part of the pie chart of what people are competing for when they're playing pool beyond just the internal rewards. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I mean, yeah, it does. I won't go to the side tangent.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. So then if let's just say that's now that we've got it, because some of the questions that we're trying to answer are, what are the rules of the game? And so the rules. So, and what are the rewards of the game? And so, if social validation and feelings of significance are a big part of the reason people play, how has it changed, or has it changed? And what I would say is that when I grew up playing pool, it was in the '90s, and the way that you would get social recognition and validation, whether it's healthy or unhealthy to pursue this, is a different question. But if that's what you're after, the way you did it in the '90s was you had to play really good pool. You had to play really good pool because what happened was we didn't have internet, we didn't have social media, we didn't have YouTube where we could watch Federer Gorst and Clint Kachi at the finals of the World Championship. The pool world consisted of who you could see with your eyes, which meant your local pool room. So you'd go in your local pool room, and there'd be a hierarchy of different skilled players, and the best players were the ones playing for the big money. And they would play heads up matches, or they'd play challenge matches with guys from out of town, and they'd be betting 500 or 1,000 a set, and everybody would be ringed around watching because that was as close as you could get to watching Federer Gorst play when you're in the '90s. Was watching, your local state champion play some out of towner for $1,000 a set. And so they'd have rings of people watching them, side betting, and talking about how awesome those players were. And what that meant was that it felt like, to me at the time, and I've had to ask myself, has this changed or has just my perspective changed? But it really felt like it was more of a meritocracy where if you were the best player in your pool room, then you were the guy that was in the spotlight playing those challenge matches. And if you were, if you weren't, then you were one of the guys that would just play your leagues and be dead money in the tournaments and move on. And so it seemed like it was a real objective meritocracy. Is that Do you remember those times? Because you were a little
I
after
do,
me.
yeah. I mean, I didn't grow up obviously like necessarily around the pool room and fully got to experience those firsthand, but I was close enough to that time frame where I can like I understand that that's what went on because I kind of caught the tail end of that of a few of the players that were left. Obviously, when you and I kind of crossed paths, like you were one of maybe the two or three guys that were kind of winning everything. So I did get to kind of see that and saw the who were like the quote unquote big players, right? Like at the time. So yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, and then what I would say has changed, and there's been a couple of big changes. So handicap and Fargo Cap tournaments is one change because we could talk about how those obviously changed. Another change though has been YouTube. Well, the internet has provided a few changes. The internet's provided a change with YouTube being able to expand our view of pool well past our local pool room and into Saudi Arabia and the World Championship finals, and Matchroom and Predator and all the being able to watch elite players. That has had a change, and the other change has been social media, Facebook, Instagram, things like this. And I guess you could say YouTube to some extent has been part of the social media as well. So YouTube counts twice. Once as so so the changes, Fargo caps and handicaps, adjusting who can play in tournaments and who gets to win the tournaments, and then the adjustments to who we get to view and how big our pool world is that we're watching, and then what are we watching, as far as, are we just watching play on the table, or are there other games that are being played through social media about marketing and packaging and branding, and there's other avenues to gain social validation and approval that go beyond putting balls in a pocket. So that's a lot of different things. So let's just take it one at a time. Let's start with where you brought up kind of right away was, how have Fargo caps and handicaps affected the payout structure on social validation, or significance, like when fighting people are fighting for significance.
Yeah. So it's okay. Keep in mind, I haven't really sat down and thought about this forever, so I may slip up a little bit and
No,
catch
got
myself
to be
like
perfect,
kind of
Jesse.
changing. Yeah, gotta be
What do
perfect.
you want? You want 2 games on the
I,
wire because you
yeah,
haven't
yeah.
prepared? What do you want
I
from me?
would say that like so I didn't really experience the maybe not being sort of closer to the top of the hierarchy for a long period of time because by the time I was 14 years old, I was already kind of at a place where I was at least competitive in like the master level tournaments. So I was able to pick one off here and there, and then
How old were you when you knocked me out of that tournament at that first time we played? I remember that. You might have
shoot, I
been
don't know.
14. You were probably 14.
Yeah, I think when I was like either when I was like just before I turned 14 was when I remember that was like when I won my first Masters tournament against that Vince Chambers in the
Oh yeah, yeah,
in like
yeah.
the bar table thing. So yeah, so I mean, I'm maybe a kind of more of a one-off type of scenario there, but I would say, in my opinion, I feel like the only changes that have really happened would be it's really only negatively affected the the small percentage of people who have gotten very very good and had to like I don't know if it's the correct way to say it, but had to actually earn their their place in the hierarchy, and that's about it. Everybody else just sort of got like a free lift up to the top to like grab some validation and find their own little like pocket of competition where now they can be the big fish or the big fish in the little pond, you know.
Yeah,
So
and I want to be clear. So I want to draw a difference between facts and judgments here, between facts and opinions. So I'm not for now. I have opinions, but I want to talk about facts. So I'm not saying this is good or bad that these changes have occurred. I'm just trying to understand these changes. So basically, let's just talk about handicaps and Fargo caps, and so when you have 500 and under tournaments, and then 600 and under tournaments, and then 700 and under tournaments, what you're doing is society is saying it's a redistribution of social validation is what it is. It's almost like in the past, like unregulated capitalism, all the money goes to the top. It's like a game of Monopoly where after 3 hours of playing, one person owns all the properties and they have all the money. And that's what happens in unregulated capitalism, which is why there's checks and balances needed to keep the game going. So, I mean, people may disagree with how much that's needed, but everybody wants to keep the game going. So, um, the with pool, it used to be that way. We're all, and so maybe it was wrong in the past because we're all the social validation went up to the top, and so it's almost like our society got together in a group and said, we don't want we all want our chance to get to feel significant. We want to share that around a little bit. We don't want all the local players that are at the top of the hierarchy in pool to get all the social validation. That's not fair. Just because they played full time, I have a job, I have kids. There's a thousand, there's 1,000 of us for every one of them, and why should they get all the admiration and respect? So here's what we're going to do: we're going to create these little sub pockets, and within those sub pockets, I'm going to get and this is not entirely new. Maybe there was leagues before where within somebody's league or within somebody's homeroom or within somebody's small, everybody creates little smaller ponds, but we're just creating different ponds to where there's more opportunity for different people to take turns climbing to the top of their own individual little pond. And then with handicaps, um, it's very it's strange. So, but how it's being done, I guess I would say it feels like as a group, that's what's going on is that the group of local pool players in different communities say, we don't want, we want to redistribute, the social validation and significance and spotlight. And so we're gonna draw these lines and create these handicaps so that we can regulate how much how much social validation is going to different groups of people. We want to make sure everyone has an equal chance, or everybody has a chance to gain from this sport. Does that make sense?
it does, yeah. And just maybe isn't where you wanted to go with it, but just a side note with that is the the one thing that I feel like might be because you see you don't know if that's really the wrong way to do it, or I would say the one thing that is wrong with that is that it was never really the player's fault that that's how it was distributed before, which led them and motivated them to put in the time so they could climb there and get to that place. And then now that they're the ones that are because they are the minority, they're sort of left out high and dry, and they're not allowed to get any of that, the validation, the money, anything. There's nothing left for them,
Yeah,
and
there.
that's because they are the minority.
Yeah. Although you could say that there is a certain like now there's a new way that you could even say you and I are enjoying it in a way, which is now there's the group of people that get to complain about it, which is I'm now in the group where me and you, I get to be like players like us. We used to now we're the victims that we're so good that we got kicked out of all the tournaments, and so we get to have that we get to have the status that comes with having been retired forcibly from our tournaments. And so like you could say that there's a certain status in being one of the guys that's kicked out where it sucks you don't get to play, but you don't necessarily lose all that status either. There's a certain status that comes from being excluded.
yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It's kind of an interesting way to look at it, but I do see what you're saying. Um,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
yeah, I'll let you continue a thought before I go and add anything
No,
else.
no, go ahead.
Okay,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I would just say, again, that I do realize that what I'm going to say is a little bit biased, but it's interesting to me because I just don't see like to what like if you just ask the question like to what end, like where does this actually go that somebody can convince me or us that this is a good direction. And I feel like the argument that always comes up is, well, if we went back to the days of open pool tournaments, the same guys would win all the time, which would then deter players from signing up and joining. And I do agree with that. I understand why there is levels, why there's handicaps, all these things, right? It doesn't have to favor only the good players. But now that like, so let's just assume that you and I are like in a hypothetical world here. You and I are never allowed to hit a competitive pool ball again. Okay, that's totally fine. So we've established that. So now if we say, all right,
When does this become hypothetical?
yeah,
I'm just kidding. Come on, I'm having some.
yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
So now let's just throw out an idea. So now let's just say we have three. Now we have three tiers of players. We have, and we'll go by Fargo rate because everybody kind of knows what that is. You have one tier that's 670 and below, and then you have 570 and below, or five whatever it is, and then like the 500 and below. Those are the three tiers that now every tournament is one of those three tiers, and it's going to be that way for the next 5 to 10 years. Well, the issue with that is, right, is naturally that the difference in money and like the social validation is not really going to be enough to bring those players that are like at a rate around 500 to be like, you know what, one day I aspire. I want to be the 650 or the 660 that's winning all those tournaments, because it doesn't really like matter at a certain point. Like it's just not enough to drive people, and when they see the sacrifice they got to make to get there, people are just going to throw in the towel. They're like, you know what? We just kind of enjoy going out once a month, drinking with our buddies, and yeah, one of us four might win the 500 and under this week, and that'd be kind of cool. It'd be a good time. So I'm not saying that's wrong either, but the point is that eventually you're going to now have a spot where the guys who are 670, there's so few of them that they're just the next ones to go. And eventually, let me just finish it. Eventually, it does just seem like it's going to be a race to the bottom where someday in this all this like handicapped like tiered pool, there's no real reason or no benefit at all to even get your Fargo rate to what would be like a 650 in nowadays skill set. Like, why would anybody ever play even that good? Because it's a negative, benefit to do that. Everybody's gonna be like, well,
So yeah. I hear
yeah,
what you're saying. I got to jump in. So I think that this is an example of going to the extreme, which is you're saying. So let's just suppose we say that only nobody over 700 can play in local tournaments. That way, all the 700s don't rob all 710s don't rob the tournaments. Well, then it's like now you got the 690s that are robbing the tournaments. So then you got to kick them out, and then you got to kick them out, and pretty soon, where do you draw the line? The problem with that is there's two problems. The first problem is compared to what? And if our society is comparing that to, okay, well, if we don't do anything, then we go back to what it was, which is the 730s rob every tournament, the 750s, whatever, they rob every tournament, and that's not any better. Number one. So what you're comparing this doomsday scenario to isn't necessarily like what you're comparing this to is actually still better for these social players, for the masses, than what we had before, in the sense of fighting for social validation. The second thing is, if it was always consistent, that yes, nationwide we've decided we're at a 680 and under is the new local. Anything over 680 you can't play local tournaments. Then it might create the same type of problem. But you have so many different tournament directors and so many different league operators and so many different handicapping systems. Some places it's 500 and under, some places it's 540 and under, some places it's 580 and under, and people's Fargo rates are edging up and down, and handicaps are changing, and there's so many different bubbles that it's not like there's a consistent hard line where these pockets are reforming. And so what I would say is that you have this bubble where nobody's happy because everybody's always feeling like they're shortchanged and they're on the wrong end of the Fargo rate and they're overrated, or they're that they should be able to play, or other people are overrated and shouldn't be playing in their events, and that there should be events more geared. Like, it's almost like a good compromise leaves everyone equally unhappy. Right? A good compromise leaves everyone equally miserable. And right now, what you've got is an army of people that are all sour about how they're rated, how their opponents are rated, and which bubbles are out there. And everybody feels a little excluded, everybody feels a little shortchanged, everyone feels a little violated, but everyone still has a chance to win something compared to what it would be if you and I were winning most of the tournaments. And so it's this, what I would say is that it's a very, very, very flawed, imperfect system, but it's still probably working for most people better than what we had before.
Yeah, and I will say that I fully agree with that, because at the end of the day, like, we're not part of the masses, and I think it's way better for the majority of pool players. So overall, do I think that it's a net positive for pool? It probably is, like, because it just is, like,
more people are getting more out of the game than they
yeah,
did before.
so that is a good thing, and for those people, like, I mean, I am happy for those people. Like, I'm not like envious of it or angry about it. It's just that it's just an interesting question to raise, which is where does this go? And that's all would be nice to know, because like you were saying earlier, it's almost like, if you're gonna do something, if you're gonna put in time into something, you sort of want to know what the rules are going to be.
That's what I wanted to get
the thing, because that was the side note I was going to go on earlier, which is just a quick
analogy,
and it's just for some people to think of. And listen, I recognize that pool is not something that should be looked at as like a career, because it just shouldn't be, right? It's for 99.9% of the people in the world, it is just a hobby. But just imagine if, like, now this is how it goes, right? For a while, like, everybody thought it would be cool to become a realtor, right? And because they're like, well, all these people are making all these great commissions, so then that sort of became a little bit, I don't know, like a lot. I just remember there was a time of that, like, a lot of people became realtors, right?
Sure.
So, like, now imagine if this is what you do, and you've been doing that for like 10, 15 years, life's good, whatever, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's like, you know what? Anybody who's actually been a licensed realtor for more than 10 years, like, you can still sell houses if you want, but each house you sell, we're just going to give you $300 for it. And then you got to watch all these people that are coming in, and they're like making this percentage commission. I know that that's changed too with the recent laws, but the point is that, like, all these people who are just kind of now in the learning phases and whatever, and making tons of mistakes, they don't really understand what they're doing, but they're getting all these crazy results, and they're allowed to do it, and they're making all this money, blah, blah, blah. I mean, maybe this is a bad example, but the point is that, like, is that really fair to, like, set up a certain rule set and then allow a bunch of people to, like, dump a bunch of time and energy into it, and then all of a sudden overnight be told, like, hey, you can't do this. Now to everybody else who's not a realtor, you just kind of shrug your shoulders, and you're like, well, yeah, I mean, kind of sucks, whatever. But just, like, I just, like, challenge everybody to, like, take a moment and think about, like, what you do for a career, and just assume that you've devoted 15, 20 years of your life to something, and then now just assume that tomorrow you just can't do that. And if you can do it, you can't make money, you can't get the things you enjoy out of it, because you've been deemed as too good at what you do to even participate. And it doesn't have to be that serious, because at the end of the day, it's just a game of pool. But that's kind of what is being done, and we're not the only like victims of the world. Like, this happens in other areas. But it's just it's an interesting way to look at something and think, like, is there even a good answer for it? Like, that's
So look, I'm dying to jump in. Okay, so the thing I would say, there's so much. We're both getting excited here. I know we have a lot to say, and we're just getting scratched the surface yet. But you're making I would say that does happen, Jesse, in a lot of ways. So, like, I think about, like, computer programming. What about the people that learn a computer programming language, and then they're really good at programming and coding, and then a few years later that language is obsolete, and the systems that they're working on are no longer the popular systems anymore, because things have all changed to different platforms and different languages, and they're now competitively at a disadvantage because the young kids are learning on this new stuff, or they've got AI to help do a lot of stuff that they used to do before. What about the people that develop, spend years and years and years developing a skill that becomes automated by some robots or some AI? This is the world. And what I would say is, the world changes, and it's not fair at all times in every way to everybody. Like that, those are some stories that we tell ourselves, that the world should be fair, and if you put in work, it should not. Like, we crave permanence, and we crave equity and fairness, and it's just, that's not exactly how the world works. So I'd say, yeah, that does happen in all walks of life. It's not just pool. But what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that either. Because, I mean, off of a recording, you and I have had this type of conversation so many times. And one of the recent things we were talking about, without, like, going into exact specifics here, is that it's interesting to watch nowadays. Like when you see what level players or they'll win these tournaments for, I mean, outrageous amounts of money that are like I don't know, they got those megalodons or whatever. They do
There's like
arbitrary names.
there's
Yeah.
$100,000 Calcutta for 400 and under Fargo race or something.
Yeah.
You're watching somebody that win just more money than you've ever won in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. It is kind of outrageous, but at the end of the day, there's a market for it. So the market is the market. That's just how life works, and it's totally fine. We can talk about how unfair it is, whatever. And you're right. It's like it does happen across like all walks of life. So we're not, it's not a victim story. It's just stating it is how it is and just asking some, genuine questions. But yeah, it is interesting, man, because it seems like that does happen in many other industries or whatever all the time. Like the coding one was a pretty good example because, I mean, we both know a few people who do that anyways, and that does make sense, man. It does happen. It's just, it's also understandable that when you have what you think or what you're kind of being told is like a certain rule set, and then all of a sudden those take a drastic change,
The rules
essentially overnight. That like as much as that might help people, it's also, it would be ridiculous to expect that the people that affects in a severe way aren't going to have a little backlash and at least have some opinions on it.
Yeah, this is why I want to talk about what the rules are. And so before we get, there's a lot of ways we can go. But I just feel like it's almost like when jump cues came out, people that were really good at playing safes and kicking before jump cues felt that was they hated jump cues because it changed the rules of the game. But now there's not good or bad with jump cues. You just have to know the rules and you have to play and adjust to the new rules. So before we go any further, I want to go through the other two areas to at least get them on the table. Another thing that changed besides handicaps and Fargo caps is that YouTube bringing views from the top players into our living room. I'm going to be very brief on this. I'll just say that, and then I'm going to move on to the third. What that does is by being able to watch Federer and Kachi play, then we're not as impressed with the local players that were at the top of the pool room because back in 2005, people would watch me play and be like, man, that's great pool. And now they don't feel that way anymore because they know that great pool is Kachi and not Demetrius, which is not right or wrong. It's fine. It's just that's a change that affected the way local players get paid out with social validation. The other thing, though, that's a big, probably to me, the biggest change is technology with social media. And what that's done is it's allowed people to get social validation through means other than pool competence. So in the past, like I said, you had to win pool tournaments or win gambling matches locally, and the better skilled players got more recognition. But now, let's suppose that I'll just take a pro player like Danny Olson, who's around 750 Fargo, hell of a guy, hell of a player, really, really, really tough, playing full-time pool, traveling, and just practicing and putting in 8 hours a day on his own home table. And most people might not know him, whereas there might be a player that is either much lower rated, but they market themselves very well on social media, and so they have a lot more attention and a lot more recognition. Or there might be somebody that's not even a player, or not a professional player, but that they're an influencer. And now we have a new way to gain. There's a new way to gain the same payoffs that's not on the pool table. So you've got influencers like YouTube producers, what do you call it, YouTube guys. You've got people, I guess me,
iPhone owners.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. We got podcasts like this that I'm doing with you. And then we've got you've got coaches and instruction, and you've got influencers that are doing trick shots and setting up trick shots and doing short Instagram reels and TikToks. And so there's all these different ways that people or you've got people that are doing branding where they're branding their journey and their image such that they gain a following of some type of attention and validation. And some of that depends on a certain amount of competence on the pool table, but a lot of it has more to do, like they're not as good as Danny Olson. So it's not just how good they play on the table, it's how well they bring their product to market, whether their product is themselves as a competitor or what they do with teaching or trick shots or just whatever. And so The point is, as I frame this conversation, because how I would frame this is very important to where we go. My point is, yes, I want to know what the rules are to the game. And back when it was like, well, the rules are you play pool, the rules of the pool game are the rules of the game, just go play pool. That was simple. But if people are playing, and if one of the big things they're competing for is social validation, attention, recognition, significance, and people are using pool skills in a hybrid with marketing and packaging to then gain influence through social media or within certain pockets, that's a new change. And it's one that depends on how society works and what technology allows. And so I've been getting my head around noticing some of and this is actually reminiscent. There was an example where changing technology changes the rules of the game, just like they did with your realtors or with coders. So the people might know that the Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy debate, this was the first televised debate in our country back a long time ago. And the people that listened on radio thought that Nixon won, but the people that saw the television thought that John F. Kennedy won because the people watching on TV, Kennedy was younger, he was very, handsome, and he presented himself physically well. Nixon seemed shiftier or nervous or anxious, or he didn't compose himself as well. And so, based on appearance and poise, the people that watched voted or responded differently than the people that listened. And that was a big change because before TV, it didn't matter how somebody's tie looked. And the technology changed the way politics was played. And so it's not new that technology changes things. And in fact, in a lot of ways, I think about how campaign is being done this election year versus how it's been done in the past, and the types of techniques and the types of strategies that the candidates are using now compared to what they did 20 years ago. And so I think I think what I would say is pool's not solo in this. There's a lot of things that are not meritocracies. So one thing I think that's interesting is that there are some instances where an industry or a competition is all a meritocracy based solely on competence. And then there's areas that are based also on packaging. And so based on what I was saying with Nixon and Kennedy, politics today, it's clearly not a true meritocracy where the best candidate based on track record and competence but I guess you could say it's a meritocracy. You just have to say that the skill set to be a good politician, packaging and branding and social gamesmanship has to, and PR is a huge part of politics. So it's still a meritocracy, but the nature of the game is different now than it might have been, or at least the way that the PR is done is different. And when I started thinking about it, I think it's interesting to think about which industries are meritocracies versus which industries aren't. So, like music, you obviously, to be a successful musician, you probably have to have competence with singing or your instrument, but you'd also probably need to have pretty good relationships and packaging and the ability to sell your product and bring it to market too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say, well, depending on like what type of music you're trying to, be
Sure.
famous for, right? But like definitely the types of music that tend to go towards like the younger crowds, right? I mean, a lot of the people that end up becoming famous are in general, their personality is a little bit more marketable. They might be a little bit better looking people. It's just there's definitely a full package there that's needed aside from just like yeah.
Yeah. It's a very interesting the rules to our social games because I was about to say, you don't see many 400-pound superstar singers, but then based on counterculture and different, different movements, that can change too. It's a weird representative way. Anyway, so then let's think about your industry. So you do, you have a business that does, hardwood floor sanding and refinishing things like this. How much of that industry is how good you are at sanding floors or finishing the product? How much of it is your ability to market or how much of it is a meritocracy versus how much of it is social gamesmanship and things like this?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I would say so that like that's one area where I feel like maybe I benefit from being able to speak clear English and be able to like be a presentable person, going out to bid projects and stuff. So I would say I have like in certain areas or certain ways like a little bit of an unfair advantage in that sense. That's not just directly based on like our overall skill set to execute the projects. Now we do have a good skill set, yeah, obviously for that too. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say that there's just a healthy mix. It's probably very close to what it is in most other industries, right? It might not feel that way to me every day because it's not as competitive as say what it would be to be like the one of everybody's trying to be the most famous YouTuber, right? So like everybody knows who Mr. Beast is, or like the top few guys, and then you don't know about the 300,000 kids that are like behind a camera every day trying to make it. So it's like it doesn't seem that way with flooring because there's not millions of people trying to create the next Harvard flooring business.
Yeah,
So
and it's hard to know. Like, I would say that it's the rules of the flooring game are still, you know, set up to where if you do a good job of both doing your service and bringing it to market and doing you got to market, you got to sell, and you got to execute the service. It still seems pretty straightforward. There are some industries like I came from sales, and I think that this makes sense to me because when I was in sales, it was a pure meritocracy in the sense that at least in most of my sales gigs, where every day the numbers got posted for our whole division and everybody got to see month to date where everybody was based on based on their numbers. And people got paid based on their numbers. And people got promoted based on their numbers. And I was thinking about how unfair it would have felt to me if I was number one in the division and my boss had come to me and said, you know what, man, you didn't come to happy hour last Friday. You should have seen it. Jack was the life of the party, man. He had like 4 shots of tequila and he was riding the Bronco Bull and everybody was laughing. It was a blast. And you know what? You should have seen Darren. He got up there and he was singing karaoke and things got wild, man. So you know what? We're going to give him the biggest bonus because he's a hell of a guy. And Jack was the life of the party. So we're going to promote him. If that had been how things had been done, boy, I don't really do well. For me personally, like I don't do well on those. I don't really play those subjective social games very well. I don't enjoy them. I don't agree with how society keeps score in a lot of ways. And so I don't participate in those games. And so if I was in a sales department that handed out bonuses and promotions based on who was the life of the party at the Bronco Buck, um, I would not stay in that department. But that was not how it was done. It was very much here's the stacked rank of where everybody's at. If you're at the top, you get a certain amount of recognition and you get the biggest bonuses and you get the opportunities. And so I think I did really, really well in sales because it was a very, very, very pure meritocracy. Then there might be some industries that are not meritocracies. There might, so like there's a lot of places that are very, very subjective and based a lot on social, how people present and play social games instead. And I think that being an influencer on YouTube or, on Instagram, for example, it's all about playing social games, which there are rules to those games. So you could say, well, there's still a meritocracy, but it's a meritocracy based on subjective social rules as opposed to tangible, objective measures like sales goals or pool skills.
yeah, the one thing I was gonna add to that is when you were talking about being in and like if that's how they decided to redistribute the bonuses, right? I think that's just kind of like the core of the question is like had like if you would have been able to see that prior to like building up a good sales pitch, like you would have probably changed your direction because you would have at least then been able to make that calculated decision, say, you know what, I don't really want to be the guy's guy at the happy hours. This is not what I'm going to do. So even though I know I can do it, like why would I do it? And I think that's like the turning point of the conversation, or like at least like again back to like not really fully knowing the rules. And it's not saying that's even wrong. It's just you as a person, like you would at least be able to analyze yourself and say, okay, here's the skill sets that I bring to the table. Here's what I really want to work on, or here's what I'm willing to change. And then if that doesn't like fit with what you want, then at least you can make the decision for yourself. Like, maybe this isn't for me. Like you said, that does happen in a lot of different areas. So it's just an interesting topic and something to
it's
observe.
it is, and so I think that, and the funny part is when I was in sales, I at one point it did there are times when it stopped being a true meritocracy. When it got to the point when I moved up into different territories where, you start getting into management and, upper management, or, different district management, who gets which districts. And well, it depends partly on your results, but it also depends on how different people respond to you, and how they're, I mean, it starts becoming political and image management as you move higher up into corporations or more complex sales roles. It stops, like, it does change the game a little bit. And so I got to see, and there were some places I didn't want to go because I didn't like those games. I would not be a very good politician because I don't like those, I don't like subjective games. I think that for me personally, if there's been a theme in this, um, I don't like subjective games. I like knowing what the rules are, and I think we both crave fairness and consistency. And when we get into roles that are based on social standing and perception, like marketing and image management, those are never going to be fair, consistent, and objective. They're going to be shifting and subjective, and somewhat inconsistent and unpredictable. And some people do very well and enjoy those things. I don't enjoy those games because of it doesn't seem fair or consistent. And I also don't put a lot of, I don't really celebrate the things that our society tends to score heavily on. So that's why I think, for me, understanding this change, I think if there's one thing I could say, is understanding how the fight for social acceptance and validation through pool, the rules have changed from being, I'm going to just play on a pool table, put balls in a hole, and that's going to result in a certain amount of, visibility, to where now I would say it's very different. And I would say, just like TV changed politics, I would say the internet and social media changed the way pool players are able to compete for validation. And it went from an objective meritocracy to a subjective image management and marketing type thing. And so for people that are listening to this, that have resented the sudden influx of all these pool players on social media, all these players that are, maybe lower rated than yourself, or that are, competing for validation in different ways on social media, in ways that you might not find appealing, or if you feel confused or put based on some of the things you're seeing, and you haven't found words for understanding why that is. Hopefully, like, this is what I've been kind of trying to get my head around. So hopefully, by hearing some of this, you guys have a better understanding of, yes, there is new technology. It has changed how people are competing for these things. And there are new games being played that are not strictly meritocracy, that are political and marketing based. And like it or not, it just helps to know that the better you understand the rules, the less unfair it'll feel. That's all.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, man. I think I agree with that.
So one thing I was thinking about, Jesse, is actually, is pool at the highest level a meritocracy? And so, for example, you can look at it and say, well, at the highest level, thankfully, pool is still a meritocracy. I mean, Fedor Gorst won the world championship, and he didn't do that because of how he branded himself. He did that because he outplayed everybody. Well, so I was at least finding some solace that at least at the highest level, the meritocracy remained. And then I had a thought, Jesse, since we last talked.
Okay.
That's going to change too, bro. And you might think, well, how does that change? Won't the best player always be the best player? But hear me out. It's always been a little unfair because it's the best player combined with a certain amount of opportunity. For example, people that don't have pool tables at home are going to be at a disadvantage compared to people that do have pool tables at home. So there's always going to be a little inequity of opportunity. And people that don't have a family that has enough leisure time to where they can, whatever. Fair enough. But it's expensive to travel to Saudi Arabia and play the World Championship. It's expensive to go to the US Open. Travel, very expensive. Hotels, very expensive. So who is going to get the opportunity to go compete? The players that have support. Now, who is going to get, okay, so to work it backwards, who is going to win the world championship? Is going to be the best pool player. Oh, sounds great, meritocracy. who is going to be the best pool player? The player who's traveling and playing full time and has been able to devote the most time and energy to traveling around the world playing pool. Players, if you have two 13-year-olds and one of them plays 10 pro events a year and travels around the country playing the world's best, and one of them plays local handicap tournaments, the full-time touring player is always going to outperform the other player in about 12 to 24 months. And if you had to guess who's going to be the next world champion, you'd never bet on the guy that played locally.
Right.
So therefore, yes, who is going to win at the highest level will come down to the highest play. But the player that gets to the highest level will be the player that is able to go to the most tournaments and put in the most input. But the player that's able to put in the most input based on the amount of cost it has might be the player that can raise the most money to support their journey. And the skill set needed to raise that money might be the player that packages and markets themselves well enough to get enough followers and get enough sponsors and get enough support and get enough donations that they can fund their way. So that it could be that right now, as I'm recording this, you might have a couple of 12-year-olds, one of which is doing a very good job branding themselves, building up a following that's going to then help them provide the opportunities to where they can play full time and develop a world-class skill set. Whereas another player who just puts their head down and says, you know what, I don't want to play those games. I don't want, or if a parent says, I don't want my 13-year-old to be some celebrity influencer and I just want them to grow up healthy. So I just want them to put in hard work on the pool table. Well, that player may not have the support they need to then go and have the same road. And that in 10 years, the players who's winning the world championships in 2030 even might be the player that did the most to market themselves and give themselves those opportunities. So in short, pool at the highest level is a meritocracy. But in order to be able to play that competence, hierarchy, meritocracy, world championship pool game, you might have to play a subjective social politics game just to be able to enter to the meritocracy tournament. What do you think of that? Does that make sense?
It does. I think that you're spot on with kind of like how that part of the game, if you want to call it, has changed, and that does seem to be what kind of leads into the players who are kind of traveling around full time. I mean, I don't follow it super closely. I don't know who like maybe the kind of older teenagers are, aside from maybe a couple people that have come locally, right? Who are doing that, but yeah, that is kind of the way it's working these days, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, it's good to, it's good that because people then kind of get to sort of vote and decide the personality and the player and the people they want to support, right? And that's
where it's like I'm trying to in this conversation, I'm really trying to remind myself not to think in terms of good or bad, but to just think in terms of what is happening and understanding it.
Yeah.
So my personal opinion, like if I had a personal opinion, like I crave that one of the reasons I loved pool was because it wasn't a popularity contest. It was about who could put their head down and develop competence.
Yeah.
And that it's actually turning into a popularity contest. And even in the part of it, like I said, even the meritocracy part of it, where it's like, well, at the highest level, it's about putting balls in the hole, but that's still contingent on first having to win a popularity contest to be able to fund your opportunities to participate in the meritocracy game.
That's
and
true.
So to me, it was upsetting to me, and I didn't know why. Like I found it distasteful. And the irony is, I'm on a damn podcast, and so it's like, and I'm not saying I hate myself, but like
It's kind
of nice. I guess I just, for all the people listening, I bet you there's a lot for every person that's out there getting a lot of spotlight and strutting around at the dog and pony show. There's got to be thousands of people that quietly resent this whole system. And so in a weird way, I feel like I probably represent, and I just want to shout out to those people because I feel you, brothers and sisters. Like I'm with you. Like I don't, it doesn't jive for me, but it's just, but by understanding how it works, it helps me then just say, well, shrug. I guess that's how our culture works. That's how things go. And then by understanding it, it doesn't frustrate me like it did,
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. And also, I mean, if, why support one player when you can support two? So for only $300,
yeah.
support us.
Yeah. For more talk about how the popularity contest is silly, send your donation stuff.
That's funny.
Yeah, no, so Yeah, so if I gain in popularity talking about how much I hate popularity, it's like that Black Mirror episode where the guy has that shard, at the end,
Yeah,
and then it's like he basically it's like this guy like is just so hates the system so much that he tries to like does this whole thing where he tells everybody off about how the system's broken and how much he hates it and how everything's so phony, and then he ends up getting a lot of popularity from that, and he ends up like living this whole celebrity status life because he gained in popularity talking about how much he hates the popularity contest. It's a funny Black Mirror episode. But anyway, yeah. Maybe that's me. I'm the guy with the glass shard on my hand. Dude, that's
yeah,
I don't know, man. I'm like trapped in this like. But in the end, yes, if we can understand. And here's the other thing is that when we talk about handicaps, when we talk about TikTok or Instagram, we can talk about how things should be, and we have opinions. But in the end, I have come to understand my opinion on it is that, or my belief on it, or understanding of it is like our society, like I don't know how much is steered because we have leaders that are making conscious decisions and structuring incentives and rules to lead our society certain directions versus how much is just things are going to work how they work. And so when TikTok and Instagram come out and when Facebook comes out, this is how I mean, this is how a human population is going to respond. The same way once television comes out, people are going to start voting. Like if you asked me, should we vote for president based on what color tie they wear? Like, should that really be a big influence of how somebody physically presents themselves? Should that be a determining factor in who wins the election? Like, I would say that doesn't seem like it should really be important. But yet, that's how it is. And we may say that people like when they apply for jobs, how tall somebody is or what color their eyes are, or you know what I mean? Maybe that shouldn't really be a factor, but it is like somehow these things factor in to people don't even realize. And and I guess just we could sit there and talk about how we like or don't like the way pool's going. And you've hinted at like should we go this way or is this or where does this but really when we talk about where it should lead or why do we have handicaps or why do we have Fargo caps? I don't really think that people are making these decisions. I think these are just inevitable evolutions based on new technology that's available. And it's just like this, we have this pool culture. It's going to do what it do, and this is what it do. And then if we want to know where it goes, I guess we just have to look at, but it all comes down to understanding why are people playing and understanding obviously there's a huge competition for social validation and the money that comes through. There's a lot more money that comes from social media, than there is through a pool tournament. So by understanding what are the incentives and what are the technology changes that are allowing new strategies to gain those incentives, it's a better predictor of where we're going to go.
yeah. That's it's a pretty good way to sum it up, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, I don't think one way is right or wrong, or it's just it's one of those things where you kind of got to sit back and observe it, and then just sort of let it happen. I mean, there's nothing we're going to say or do that's really going to change it. It's just this has always been kind of a fascinating topic, and you and I have covered it, like on car rides multiple times and little tiny conversations. But it's kind of good to just sit down and get a good overview of it, and yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and I think that for me personally, I get to vote for myself. So I don't get to change the technology. I don't get to change the world. But in case it's not clear, like I personally don't, and I like the objective, clear, four rails, pool walls. You can run the balls out or you can't. That's where I lose. That's where I stop. I'm not really interested in the game beyond that. And so I'm in a weird spot because I also teach pool for a living. And so part of being an effective, I have to have students that, work with me. And so I have to get my name out there. So part of my business competence depends on branding. And so one of the reasons I do these podcasts, I mean, I if these conversations are interesting to others, I'm happy to share because I know there's probably a lot of people wrestling with these same thoughts. So that's one reason I do it. Another reason I do it is because of course, I want to make sure that people know that they can come train. But I've asked myself this question, which is if I knew that I'd always have enough, students coming in to work with me that I didn't have to market anymore. Would I continue to do these podcasts, and why? I think I still would, because I like the fact that if people are taking something out of this, I'm glad I can entertain or help people along the way. But would I do it? Am I doing it for my own social validation reasons and things like this? And I've had to really wonder about that, because but in general, I don't really like those games. So for me personally, I'm going to stick to my 4 rails, my pool table, shooting balls in a pocket. That's really what speaks to me, is just the objective effectiveness on the pool table. And if that speaks to you guys too, then and you want to get more effective, you can come work with a good old M and Pool Boot Camp. Any closing thoughts or any other areas you want to go?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll. I mean,
I'm
you could decide if you want to
yeah,
keep it or leave it, but it was just made me think, like, you were just saying, if you knew that you were going to have enough students, would you continue to like do the marketing side of things? And I think, one thing to say is that I think it's a lot easier to do maybe the parts of a business or parts of a process that you maybe aren't so in love with, but you just know you kind of do because it's kind of part of it. As long as you're still like getting the the good side of the process that you like, right? So I feel like if you're running a business and maybe you don't love hopping on a live like Q&A every month or something, right? For an hour, that's not your favorite, but the ROI of it is maybe just kind of break even, but you just kind of like it, or you just kind of do it because it's like, yeah, people get value out of it. I feel like it's a lot easier to do that as long as your business is still like running and remaining profitable, right? Whereas like if all the reasons why you actually did the business to begin with just go away, well, all of a sudden there's no reason for you to do that, right? You don't want to even stick through the things that are just like meh.
Well, and there's also no opportunity. So for people that come train with me, it does support the podcast, because if I was working full time, I would not have the opportunity to do these things. And so I still work my tail off. I work 40 hours in 3 days. But what I mean is, I'm not working a corporate gig. And so if I was working a corporate gig, then I would not be. I like to think about it this way. I would train one-on-one with everybody for free if I could. But if I tried doing free lessons, then I would have to get a corporate job, and I would not have the time to. So I almost look at it like, when people come train with me, I almost look at it like I would love to meet and spend 3 days working with that person on their pool game, out of the goodness of my heart. But I can't, because if I do, then I can't. Then I have to go get a corporate job, and that's the last person I ever get to help. So therefore, I would like to look at it like I'm helping people out of the goodness of my heart, and that they are making a donation to help the next person. It's almost like they're paying it forward. They're making a donation so that I can help somebody else then too. And everybody that comes and trains with me, you're making a donation to me that's allowing me to then train the next person for free. That's how I kind of wish it was, or kind of how I look at it. Because in the end, Jesse, I would do this even if I didn't need to, as long as I have the opportunity to keep doing it, which I'll only have if people continue to come train pool.
Yeah, I will say you're probably one of the only people that I know that's like as passionate about pool as you are. And it's, if people haven't met you and really like, been around you long enough, it could create some eye rolls, I guess. People like, yeah, of course, I would say that too if I was trying to get students. But he really is like one of the only guys that's this passionate about the game. And, even for myself, like I do love the game in many ways, but I'm just like, I just don't have the drive and the passion that Demi does. So it's good to be around him too, because he kind of reminds me the reasons why I like the game, and even when I like focus on some negatives or something. So
yeah. In the end, man, I like it because it's 4 rails, and I don't understand the rules of our social games, and I don't necessarily enjoy playing those social games. And so for me, pool's always been a spot where I could just go into those 4 rails and everything makes sense to me, and it's fair. And so some of the things in life that we crave, fairness and clarity of rules and objectives, that those are things that don't exist in life. The rules are very murky, the objectives are very murky. How and they're fluid and they change, which also leads to feelings of unfairness. But pool, man, you go into the pool rails and it's like it's always clear and fair and satisfying. And so I just want to play pool. So yeah. All right. Well, Jesse, that was fun, man. I hope I'm looking forward. I have a hunch that we're going to get a ton of comments, and so based on those comments, I think we're going to probably have to circle back and do another episode.
Yeah, that's
where
totally fair. We can do a follow up here, and yeah, I guess my like closing remark is like I said, I mean, I do feel like probably when we dive into things, I might go a little bit too much of a biased view on things that might sound negative to people who maybe come from a slightly different background in the game. So I just do want to make it clear that like I'm not trying to be a hater towards certain parts of the game. I'm just I have certain views, right, that and experiences as we all do, and I think things are good for pool in the end, no matter what direction we go. It's always very interesting to sit back and observe and kind of just decide like where we go as individuals and just where the game goes. So
when you see somebody that's that's a much lower level than you holding up a check much bigger than anything you've ever won, it does make you scratch your head sometimes. And so, but in the end, I hope that the compass that we use is we get to talk about what we're seeing factually, and things that are pretty much everybody would agree that this is what's happening. And then we have our opinions about what's happening. And so, as long as we separate, hey, here's the fact part of what's changing, and then here's our opinions about them. I think we're fine. I think we're fine. So of course you're gonna have opinions, but the main topic here is not just how we feel about it, but at least I think we're in agreement with what we're seeing.
yeah,
So
for sure.
Cool. I look forward to seeing. Put comments and emails to info@mnpoolbootcamp, and hopefully we can do a follow-up episode. And yeah, it'll be fun. Thanks, guys, for coming along.
All right, thanks.
Supporting the. All right.